All right, so let's get away from the social sciences for a minute and jump back to the business part, because you are at the Stern School of Business. So let's talk about business. I've had a bunch of libertarians on lately. I've been talking a lot about capitalism lately. I know capitalism doesn't seem cool to a lot of young people. Suddenly socialism is really cool. But in terms of business, one of the interesting things that you've said basically is that businesses can actually find more profit just by acting ethically, right? There seems to be this idea in America that if you act unethically and you cheat the system, you're going to win a lot of money or make a lot of money or whatever. But actually, by acting ethically, they can have better bottom lines, correct?
Yeah, that's right. So, when I moved to Stern in 2011, I had no interest in business. I just wanted to be in New York City, and I was able to get a temporary position here. And then soon after I got here, Occupy Wall Street broke out. And suddenly everybody was talking about politics, capitalism, business. So it suddenly got really interesting. And I've learned a lot about it in the last few years. And one of the things I've learned is that there was an idea called shareholder primacy that became very popular in the 80s. And the idea that the business is owned by the shareholders, and your job is to generate returns for the shareholders. And when you look at business that way, then your biggest cost is your employees. And what you need to do to honor your fiduciary duty to the shareholders is to squeeze the employees, squeeze everybody, squeeze the suppliers, pass on costs. So if you have that view, then it's very hard to get business ethics. And you get all kinds of bad behavior. You get Volkswagen, you get all sorts of things. But that's a really bad way of thinking about business. And what's been really interesting to me is to see business as a human enterprise. Business is overwhelmingly about cooperation. Business people, I always ask this when I give talks, what percentage of your day are you spending competing with anybody? And what percentage are you spending cooperating? And it's almost cooperation. And so once businesses begin to think that business is a set of relationships, this is basically called stakeholder theory. You have to have good relations with your customers, with your employees, with your suppliers, and those relationships need to be cultivated. If you do that, then over the long run, they help you out and everything goes great and people enjoy working for you. So it's once you get businesses to shift, or once businesses choose to shift to a long-term time frame and thinking about relationships, ethics just flows out naturally.
So that's interesting. Does the morality part then come in and kind of muck that up sometimes? So you could take, when we had 2 years ago or 3 years ago, the big brouhaha over Chick-fil-A and their stance on gay marriage. I assume that the owner, I think his name, Dan Cathy, if I'm not mistaken, of Chick-fil-A, felt that he was doing the moral thing by giving some money to people that were against marriage equality. Obviously, a lot of people felt that he was doing the immoral thing and protested. And ultimately, if I know correctly, Chick-fil-A's never been more successful than they are right now. So injecting morality into it is subjective and can create unintended consequences, right?
That's right. That's what my next book is about. The tentative title is 3 Stories About Capitalism, the Moral Psychology of Economic Life. And it's all about how, if you want to understand, business, consult an economist, look at historians, that's all important. But actually, a lot of it is psychological. And so our normal human psychology makes it really easy for us to cooperate and form these relationships. But there's interesting things like, for example, the idea of usury, the idea of loaning money at interest. Now, in a lot of religions, and in Islam and Christianity long ago, well, if I give you $100, how can I ask for $110 back? That's not fair. And so usury was banned because it felt like cheating, it felt wrong. But you can't run a good economy without availability of capital, without loans at interest. So sometimes our moral psychology makes trade possible. Sometimes it interferes. And Uber, everybody's talking about Uber and their surge pricing. Well, you're going to charge me more when it's raining, taking advantage of me? That's so unfair, But Americans have pretty much gotten that okay, I get it. But the French and other countries, they're like, oh no, this is not fair. So so it's interesting the way that morality can both block effective business, as in the Chick-fil-A example, or it can sustain it and promote it.
Yeah. So where does the government fit into that then? I'm going to guess that you're not huge into government intervention, but there's probably some need for some of it to control the truly greedy people and the people really with bad intentions?
Right. So this is the fundamental question of politics these days. I mean, there are a couple, but one of the long-running ones is, what's the role of government? And if you're on the left, you believe on economic matters the government should have a very active role, and if you're on the right, you believe it should not. And I think the most compelling view that I've heard is the government has an essential role to play in creating the platform on which all this activity takes place. The government should not then be a player in the field. And so I spent 3 months in Asia last year doing research for the book. And so Chinese capitalism was seen as very successful until last summer. The stock market went down. But, so authoritarian, it's basically where the government sets up the playing field and owns most of the big companies and can change the rules to favor its companies. That's a really bad game to be playing, and lots of people don't want to play. So I'm not a big fan of government being a player on the field. I think government must set the rules, set the standards, run the courts, and you do need antitrust. So, I mean, there are a number of areas where you do need the government to play a role. But ultimately, it comes down to how much do you value decency, sort of protecting people, and how much do you value dynamism, encouraging creative destruction?
Yeah. So if you heard a libertarian say, well, with the antitrust laws or with any of this stuff, that you're just making the government bigger, it's just sort of the reverse argument. But you would say that you just somehow need some controls on this stuff ultimately.
Yes, but I would also say that whenever I have sort of had an intuition just from like reading the newspaper, and then I talk to a libertarian, they'll explain, oh no, here's why that's totally wrong. Then I'll talk to somebody on the left, oh no, here's why that's like. We are so limited and biased in our thinking. These things are so complex. You can't just read the newspaper and figure it out. And again, you need to bring people with different views together with some norms of civility to hash this out. And so universities should be where that happens. But you don't have, you do have libertarians in the economics department, so that's good. But outside of that, you don't have the kind of viewpoint diversity that we need to figure out the most important questions we're facing, like how do you get capitalism working well so that we get growth that is widely shared and then we're all better off? That's what we need to figure out. And because the universities are getting so orthodox, not good at it.
Yeah, so that's what I've asked a couple of my guests that I've had on lately, like Yaron Brook from the Ayn Rand Institute. I asked him, does capitalism just need some better people to sell the ideas? The ideas have become uncool. There's as I'm discussing this with you, there's this feeling, you talk about capitalism, it feels old and antiquated, but if we were at a Bernie rally and you started screaming about socialism, everybody would be thrilled. That's a real problem.
No, that's right. So capitalism has always had certain problems. And when I say capitalism, what I mean is just a free market society, where basically the means of production are not owned by the government generally. And so you have to keep separate whether the government plays a heavy-handed role, and then the question of whether there's a safety net. And a lot of people confuse those two. So almost everybody believes there should be a safety net. So everybody likes Scandinavian capitalism. And they think that Scandinavia is socialist. And it was briefly. But the socialism part didn't work very well for them. It was incredibly inefficient. They had huge budget deficits. So they were able to shift to a very free market society with a really good safety net in which government has a role in the safety net.
Right.
So if you keep those two apart, then you can get people to say, okay, yeah, we do need to give people security. And the left is correct about that. In America, people won't quit their job because they'll lose their health insurance. And so we're supposed to be this nation of entrepreneurs and risk takers, but we're all afraid of losing our health insurance. Now Obamacare has helped that. But in Scandinavia, I hear, going there next, in Scandinavia, people are happy to quit their job and try something new because the safety net's so good that they're not worried.
So basically that's the trade-off, that they pay very high taxes, but the safety net exists, and then they've sort of separated that from how businesses are able to operate. Yeah,
that's right. You have to have a dynamic business environment. You have to. In this world, if you don't, you're France, you're Italy, you're going down. I don't really see much of a future for Southern Europe. So you have to have a dynamic business environment. But capitalism always has creative destruction. The reason why productivity goes up and up and up is basically we're able to do more with fewer workers, and so people get fired. That's the way we make progress. But you can't just fire them and leave them there. And in Scandinavia, they do a lot of job training. They take care of them. So I think there are a lot of forms of capitalism. Scandinavian capitalism is usually held up as the best one. Ours has problems. And this election should be a time that we talk about them.
So I'm glad you brought up the election, because that's exactly where I wanted to go right now. So how do you take some of these principles that you're talking about, morality in business and happiness and business principles and ethics and all of these things? So let's go to Donald Trump first, because I don't know how many of those words fully describe him appropriately. I guess it would depend on who you're listening to. What do you make of Well, you know what? Let's just go to the business part of Donald Trump first. Depending on who you listen to, this is either the greatest businessman ever, or if you listen to some other people, they'll tell you, well, he's been in bankruptcy this amount of times and he's cheated the system this way and that way and the other thing. What do you make of him as a businessman before we get to the politics part?
So I don't know that much about his biography. My sense is that he's not what you would really say. He's not a great businessman. What I mean is, if it was somebody who'd built a company, ran it, made all the management decisions, faced crises. So if we had a real, I've met a number of CEOs. They're usually, if they got that high, they usually have good people skills, good analytical skills. So if we had, a CEO type who was also had some compassion, and if we had a good CEO type, that's kind of what we need. Like, our nation's really screwed up, really inefficient. We need somebody to kind of kick us in the ass. Mitt Romney could have been that. Like, private equity is all about, you take an inefficient thing, you kick it in the ass, you make it efficient. So the best Mitt Romney from when he was governor, that guy could have actually been what we needed. What we got was a Mitt Romney who went through the conservative shredder. Wasn't anybody that I would vote for. So I wish we had somebody like that. Now, Donald Trump, as I understand it, like, he's just a branding machine. He inherited money. He puts his name on things, but he didn't build those hotels. Maybe he did some of them. But so I don't think that Trump has shown the kind of business acumen and experience that we need. Trump is extraordinarily illiberal and uncurious. Those are two traits I really don't want in a president. So I'm extremely alarmed by the possibility that he could be our president. I think it would be a disaster. Yeah,
it's funny because I'm conflicted on him at least one level, which is that I'm so against the PC stuff that I do like that idea, right? I like that concept. He's breaking through this.
One saving grace. I mean, it's the only good thing about a Trump presidency is the PC stuff.
Right, and yet, ironically, I absolutely recognize this is the same person who threatens to sue reporters all the time. So that sort of goes to the lack of do you think there's a real lack of a moral compass there?
Yes, I do with Trump. But, it's interesting. Do you want a president with a very strong moral compass? And here it's complicated. I mean, Jimmy Carter, very ethical man, won't lie to you, and not an effective president. Bill Clinton, Slick Willie, not that much of a moral compass, but I think a much more effective president. So, I think Machiavelli was right about a lot. We don't want our leaders, we don't want them to be saints. Leadership is an incredibly hard job. Being the president is an incredibly hard job. You want somebody who's prepared to make very, very hard decisions, to sometimes even, I don't want to say break the law, but, they can't always play by the rules.
Yeah.
And, so Hillary Clinton, there's no problem there. I'm not concerned that she's too ethical. I don't want to criticize her on that. I just want to, because I wish I didn't have to vote for her, but I just think foreign policy, and I think she can handle it, Trump can't, and so I'm voting for her.
Yeah, so that's interesting because a lot of people, I think, are there with Hillary. There's a sense of this burn the system down thing, whether it's coming from the Bernie people or the Trump people. And for most of the people that are in between, they're just saying, this is the best one we got. And it's not great, but it's probably not that far from Obama. And that's even people that like Obama and dislike Obama, that just want the system to exist. That's kind of very uninspiring, huh?
So I think that's where we are. Now, the thing I would add to this conversation about politics is that voting for president especially is not a practical thing. It's not like people are saying, which one will get me better tax rates and which one will do more for me? For the county, regulator, zoner, we do that. But president is a quasi-religious position. He's the high priest of the American civil religion. And so people aren't practical. It's an expressive act. And this is why I think a lot of people are voting for Trump, even a lot of conservatives. Now, Trump, if you're a conservative, you don't want radical change. Like, you don't want someone who's going to just knock everything down. That's so unconservative. But a lot of people are frustrated, and a lot of people are mad at Obama on the right. So, and this is the big problem with democracy. This is what I think a lot of Americans don't realize. The founding fathers hated democracy. They did not want a democracy. They read Plato. There was an amazing article by Andrew Sullivan on how we're following the path Plato laid out about how countries veer into tyranny, and democracy is the step before tyranny. The founding fathers were afraid that a demagogue can appeal to passions, and if you have a democracy, the people get to set everything up. So we now have a democracy. They gave us a republic, but over time in the progressive era, we changed a lot of things about voting, about the Senate, all sorts of things, to go from republic to more of a democracy. And that worked okay in the 20th century. Now, if Trump wins, it'll be the worst fears of the founding fathers.
Right. So I did a video a couple months ago on Trump, and I basically said what I fear is that he doesn't care about any of our societal norms or even how the government works. And that we have 3 branches of government, and the executive branch is only one branch that signs stuff into law, and other people have to write it, and other people have to decide whether it's legal. But a lot of people basically were giving me shit on it, basically saying, well, those branches will keep him in check. But do you think when it comes to someone of that big, that type of demagoguery, that once you allow that then it really rattles the others to their core, on top of the fact that he then would select Supreme Court justices, et cetera?
Oh, yeah. No, that's right. I mean, we really could be facing a constitutional crisis. And if you just look at the things, say, that Ronald Reagan did to get, the Iran-Contra deal, George Bush had all these signing statements, Obama has done so much by executive fiat, and these are all like people who were like decent, responsible presidents. They were found ways to get around the law. Trump was no respect for the process, and this is once you believe that the ends justify the means, that's the big step on the road to hell. So, Trump has no respect for process. He would try to make all sorts of things happen. Who's going to stop him? I mean, he could pack the courts. Who knows what he could do.
Yeah. So is that a huge failing of President Obama then? Because look, we've basically been, as I saw just this morning, he's the longest serving president ever at war. We still don't have congressional authorization to be in Iraq right now. They find little ways to get around it. He's done a lot via executive action. Now, yes, George W. Bush did a lot, but when Barack Obama was running, he said that he shouldn't be allowed to do it. Obamacare, he said, we're going to put all the proceedings, they're all going to be on C-SPAN and it'll be transparent. It wasn't. If you like your health insurance, you can keep it. It wasn't. Now Obamacare may basically be fine. That's for other people to decide. But that the ends justify the means. That's sort of the way they all operate, right?
Well, that's right. So the first principle of moral psychology in the righteous mind is intuitions come first, strategic reasoning second. So once you know what you want, what end you want to reach, you then employ all your powers of reasoning to get there. So whatever party does not control the Senate is adamant about value filibuster, and we need the filibuster. And then as soon as they get power, damn that filibuster. The minority party is stopping us from doing anything.
Right. So and that's exactly what the Democrats did, by the way.
That's right. That's right. And so same thing with executive power. So when the other party has the presidency, we need limits on executive power. And then when they get power, then they want no limits. And that's all been within the realm of sort of like reasonable politics. And so if Trump comes in, we're in like 3 standard deviations beyond anything we've ever seen. And yeah, it could be a disaster.
What role do you think the media plays in all of this? Because I try to talk about the media. The media doesn't do this anymore. They don't do long-form conversation, really let you get to an idea. They put on representatives of campaigns. They put on former campaign advisors. CNN literally puts on superdelegates as if they're somehow nonpartisan. How do we negotiate what the media is even telling us?
Yeah. So there's 2 interesting things that from all the reading I've done on this. One is that we're just back to where things used to be. So in the early days of the Republic, all the newspapers were partisan, and they were nasty, and they were full of lies. So we had a temporary period from the 40s through the 70s when we had 3 networks, and everybody got their news from these responsible. So that was the anomaly. And in a sense, we have to remember that was the unusual time. And so we're just sort of back to where we were. So that's partly true. Then there's a sense in which we're in totally new territory because of technology. So once you get cable TV, and then you get the rise of these partisan shows on cable TV and microcasting, now one of our worst cognitive sins is confirmation bias. Mm-hmm. We reach out to confirm what we already believe. And so beginning with cable TV all the way through the internet, it's made it so easy to confirm. And where it gets really alarming to me is social media. I think that sort of the mainstream media is less important in this. Social media is something new because we're all really, really concerned about our reputations. And the older media didn't impact that. But social media, what I hear is that students, like, they're on their Facebook page, like, they're afraid to like something that they like because they'll be slaughtered for it.
Yeah.
So we're all, it's like, it's like we're all living in East Germany. with with like the Stasi looking over our shoulders, and we're all afraid to speak honestly. So that, I think, is more social media than the media broadly construed.
Yeah, and then of course there's people just getting media information and news from sources that they believe in, and that doesn't help either, right?
That's right. That's right. So we have certain intellectual or cognitive proclivities that are bad for democracy, bad for self-governance. And our traditional liberal institutions, I mean classical liberal institutions, were sort of to guard against that, and rule of law and trial by jury, and there's all sorts of things to sort of restrain our excesses. And I think the modern technological environment is, again, it's like injecting vast amounts of amphetamine and cocaine into us. We're all like, jumping around like in this new environment. And, I kind of hope that in 10 or 15 years, we'll understand that, and we'll give our kids, we'll all have media training, and we'll have ways to sort of insulate them from the fear of, so we might figure this out. But for now, it's kind of whipping us all around. We don't know what's going on.
Man, so it really must be such a fascinating position that you're in. You're so around young people. You're around the technology that they're using. Obviously, you're on Twitter and all these things. And yet you're really doing the long game here, and yet you're around so much sort of short game craziness. How does that work for you when you're trying to find happiness in all this?
Oh, it's actually thrilling. I mean, I'm very lucky in that I kind of took some risks to start speaking about this stuff, and nothing bad happened to me. So I came out and I pointed out that my field, social psychology, is all on the left, and that this is damaging our research in some ways. And to my field's credit, nobody attacked me. Like, people said, "Oh, maybe you're right." And so I took some risks early on, but it's worked out very well for me.
Yeah.
And now I've been doing it more and more, and like I keep going further and further, and nothing bad is happening to me. So it's actually, I feel like, I took some risk and it paid off, and then I get to like think about all this interesting stuff, and I get to talk with I just love learning multiple fields. So like, I get to learn about, well, what's going on with the media? Like, now I'm reading, Plato and the founding fathers. Like, wow, it's, so it's a gigantic sociological and psychological puzzle. And it's really fun to figure it out.
Yeah, so sort of you're providing cover for other professors and faculty members that just are afraid to do it. And as you said right when we started, you're getting a certain leash here because of coming from a business school that they just don't have. So you're like the front line on this, and the hope is that you can, break a wide enough hole here that enough people will come through with you.
Yeah, but I don't want, I sort of stepped out in front in my field in social psychology. And then when I did that, I was then joined by some other social psychologists. We wrote a paper on this. So I've got 5 or 6 really close allies: Lee Justin, Phil Tetlock, Jarrett Crawford, Joe Duarte. So we did this in social psychology. And then we heard from, a grad student in sociology, Chris Martin, and then a law professor, Nick Rosenkrantz. And so we formed Heterodox Academy. And then now if you go there, we have about 25 members. And next month, we're going to open up to any professor, any person with a PhD, an academic appointment will be welcome to join. We want to create a network of hundreds and hundreds of people, and we expect and hope most will be on the left. We want the liberal left and libertarians and conservatives to join us in saying we all support viewpoint diversity. And potential grad students, if you come work in this department, there are 4 of us here in the department who support viewpoint diversity. So don't worry, you won't be discriminated against. So we think, because it's an emperor's new clothes situation, we think that now there's a lot of us, we can create a space in which young people can come out and say what they think. That's what we're hoping.
Yeah, I'm curious, do you get pinned sometimes as somehow a right-wing maniac? Because that's one of the things I find. If I talk about this stuff, I always say, I'm on the left. That's why I'm talking about the left. I've never, I think only once in my life, I've never voted for a Republican in a big election. I think only once in a minor election. So
I'm exactly the same, that's right.
Yeah, so because of that, though, I'm trying to police my side. But do you find that people pin you that way?
On the internet, I get Google alerts about my name. And so, yeah, once a month, somebody refers to me as a conservative. But then what's nice is others will, like who've read my books, they'll write back and say, no, Haidt's not a conservative. He's, if anything, often people say I'm on the left. I'm not on the left anymore.
Right.
But, but no, I'm well enough known and people have read my books. So like most people know I'm not a conservative. But I got to say, this just in the last 6 months, the campus stuff and the free speech stuff is making me read a lot more classical liberalism.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I said to you right before we started, I only started this show, this version of it, in September. That's not that long ago. And then suddenly just some of these things that I had percolating, all hell started breaking loose, and here we are.
That's right. In fact, so, it's just so current. So I was just reading, Deirdre McCloskey, this wonderful economist in Chicago, she has a new book out, Bourgeois Dignity, or no, Bourgeois Quality. And so I was just reading in the Wall Street Journal, her article, and so she has this great quote from Adam Smith. I'd heard this before, but it's like, here it is. Here's it from Adam Smith. Allowing every man to pursue his own interest, his own way, upon the liberal plan of equality, liberty, and justice. Like, what's wrong with that? Like
that's pretty good, right?
Isn't that what we're supposed to be doing?
And that fits. That's the part that I want to implore for the social justice warrior crew. All of the justice that you want fits within that. You know what I mean? It fits within allowing people to express their views, and if you show them your good views, they will beat their crappy, old, actually racist views instead of just screaming racism at everybody.
That's right. So, so a couple. Maybe I can take this opportunity to put out a few memes, a few ideas, and I assume a lot of your audience is students or college students.
Yeah, this is on the internet, so they are young. Yeah.
Okay. So two things. So one is I hope students and people just start saying much more often, "You don't get to tell me what to say," or "You don't get to tell me what to wear." And this is what's so illiberal. These campus trends, people say, "You can't wear that, you can't say that, you can't do this." Like, no, you don't get to do that. So that, I think, is a helpful idea. And the other is that what I really hope will happen is that student groups on every college campus in America next fall will push their student government to hold a vote. I want there to be a vote on every college campus. Are we a safe school or a dangerous school? If we're a safe school, that means we take steps to protect people from hateful ideas. We don't want people to be upset by ideas that they find offensive. And we'll have bureaucratic and administrative procedures, we'll have trigger warnings, we'll have safe spaces. We will protect people from upsetting ideas. That's a safe school. A dangerous school says, no, you can't make threats, that's against the law. And if somebody, and repeated stuff can be bullying. So, there are some limits here. But beyond that, no. People say what they want, and we don't protect people from ideas. You're grown-ups. And so I don't know how that'll all play out, but imagine that let's say the University of Chicago and the University of Virginia, those are two schools that have really strong traditions of free speech. Imagine they voted to be dangerous schools. What would happen to their applications next year? It would go through the
skyrocket,
roof.
I hope, right?
That's correct. And what kind of people would go there? It would be people a little bit tougher, who aren't so fragile. So those two schools would then have cultures that aren't so vindictive and sensitive. And it would be a lot more fun to go there. And there would be a flourishing intellectual climate because people wouldn't be afraid to speak. So please, UVA students, Chicago students, if you're listening.
Yeah, well, listen, I absolutely am going to spread those messages as far as wide as I can. I guess final thought on this, and I think I know your answer. You're probably a big proponent of tenure, correct?
No, it's complicated. I don't know. In general, in working this book on capitalism, there's a really important principle, which is that we need to have a world full of feedback loops. And so if someone does their job badly, they need to suffer or be fired eventually. Or if a business doesn't give something people want, it goes out of business. But in government, we don't have those feedback loops. So government agencies can treat you badly year after year, nothing happens. So since I'm talking about that in my book, and I got to say, well, in tenure, we don't really have feedback loops. I mean, there's a little bit of post-tenure review. So there are reasons why we would have tenure, but I think we have to have vigorous and real post-tenure review. It's a complicated issue. I don't have a strong opinion, but I do believe that there should not be guaranteed lifetime employment ever, anywhere. It has to be contingent on how well you do your job.
Well, look at that. You just took a position that doesn't necessarily ensure your future well-being. So that's how I know you're a man of your word.
Thank you.
Well, listen, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. And what's nice is that, we do so much about this stuff, and it sounds so depressing for the future, and we think things are spinning out of control. But I think you gave this a nice spin, and this is what people want, to realize that we're winning and there's a chance here. So I really appreciate you coming on the show.
It was a great pleasure talking.
All right, and for you guys, for more on the work that Dr. Haidt does, check out his website, jonathanhaidt.com. All right, thanks, Doc.
Heterodox Academy.org.